Greetings all, this is Matt Field. Again, I'm a candidate, an unaffiliated candidate and writing candidate for governor of the state of Utah. I thought that it would be good to continue on with various podcasts to address the various issues that take place in the state and how my response would be in regards to my very comprehensive proposal. Again, the proposal is called Morality Over Monarchy, Root Out Corruption. You can obtain this at govmat.org for free. There's an audio file. There's also a text file. I provide many references therein. I'm looking at it right now. And you can print it out. If you're old school and you want to listen to, if you want to have the touch of those pages between your fingers, then you can do it that way. And I've made it easier to print that way. I didn't put it in regular book format. I just put it on the regular 8.5 by 11 sheets that you can use. And this is something that I, in some ways, didn't initially want to do. I have a lot going on in my life right now, and I wasn't really planning. If I was ever to run for office, I had hoped for a quieter time in my life to run, but as is many things, they don't go as planned. And so I felt the need to run for governor now, as I describe in my foreword of the book. But again, I highly encourage you to go through and listen to that. I have 8 different priorities that I'll list off for you real quick, just to kind of give you an idea. The first one is free agency and reinforcing that free agency. The second kind of aligns with the Second Amendment, as does the first, but in establishing neighborhood militias. That I can dive into a little bit later on another episode. But it would be the first line of defense against basically intruders within that neighborhood. These aren't personal armies, of course, but they are ways in which you are able to wield power in order to secure your family and your friends. The next one on the list is in regards to our youth, and I have very comprehensive plans in that, and kind of a sub-acronym that goes along with that, along with the first priority as well. But again, it's best for you to go and take a listen and to review it, because the amount of issues that we have in the state, and you would believe that the state of Utah is actually generally a quiet and, for lack of a better word, maybe obedient state. We are law-abiding citizens, as is said, and that's a good thing, right? We should be good people. We should adhere to those things, but you would be surprised of the amount of corruption that currently exists in the state because of the over amount of trust that has been placed into our public officials. The last, my last 5 priorities are: I have a tax plan where we go from a tax position in the state to an endowment styled, so we would eliminate taxes. There's also a marriage plan in that same priority. The next priority is in relation to news and tech, which, anyway, basically in Section 230 in the United States federal codes and laws, it has allowed multiple companies to take advantage of various aspects of that law, and instead of functioning as a platform, they function as a publisher. And so I would essentially say you've got to pick one or the other. You're either a publisher or you are a platform. And there are different things that go along with that. So that's the next one that I have on the list. The next goes into AI creation. And, you know, if anyone has been following the news, Saudi Arabia has declared the first 2 robots, or I'm not exactly sure what they call them exactly, but they've declared them as citizens of Saudi Arabia. And as a citizen, you are accounted certain rights. And if the same thing happens in the United States, then we begin to have some serious problems. So I address that. The next one on the list is the judicial legislation from the bench, which takes place a lot more frequently than you might realize. Just because a judge decrees something, it does not make it law. It is a judgment for a particular case. It does provide precedent, I understand that, but it also doesn't mean that it is actually the law. But we have to have provisions in place to basically, in big rulings, have the legislator assemble and make a decision on which way that law is supposed to swing. Because the judicial branch is just supposed to interpret. not legislate. And that's been happening quite frequently lately. And then the last one is the Great Salt Lake. The Great Salt Lake has never had a problem my entire life. And I grew up in a small town in northern Utah. And I've lived actually throughout the entire state between college and work and all that sort of thing. And I've never heard of any problems with the Great Salt Lake up until they decided to start mining lithium out of there. So, and then of course the state comes in and says, hey, well, you guys need to stop using so much water so we can give it to the Great Salt Lake. This has nothing to do with our water consumption. This has to do with the current contracts in place for lithium miners. And I don't have access to all that information yet, but I'm working to get a little more information on that front. So those are the priorities, and I highly encourage you, to take the time to go and listen to it. Actually, the first episode in this series is me kind of going through it in a quicker fashion. It's still about 30 minutes long, but it's not that long of a listen. The full proposal is close to 2 hours, but again, if you think that a slogan is going to solve the problems in the state, or you think a politician that has a bright, shiny smile and has incredible charisma is going to be the one that's going to solve the issues in the state, then you're fooling yourself. One of the things that I think most people miss is the people behind the scenes that keep the entire world running. It's not the guy that's standing at the podium pounding on it and doing all these different things. It's those people that are quietly working and doing their jobs the way they're supposed to do them in order to accomplish great things. And that is something that's totally missed. I'm not a public figure. I'm not known, but I have operated a handful of businesses, and we've had success. Obviously, I'm not trading my company on the New York Stock Exchange or anything like that. We haven't been wildly successful, but I have had success, and that says something about my ability to operate a business, about my ability to move forward and quietly get the work done that's needed in the state. So that's kind of the preface. So again, I encourage you, go to govmat.org, download the audio, or you can, wherever you're listening to this podcast, you can probably bump back a few tracks and can locate the first episode. So let's go. I want to jump into some of the news here real quick about the state of Utah. And I know many of us haven't really taken too much interest in the state of Utah, probably because we've always just maybe thought it was boring, or we thought it wasn't near as interesting as what was happening at the federal level. But let me explain something to you. The only way in which we're going to be able to get our country back to where it needs to be is if we are actively wielding the 10th Amendment. And the 10th Amendment says that the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively, or to the people. Meaning that the state has great power in its boundaries, and the federal government really doesn't have a huge place in the state unless the state allows them. And largely this is controlled by the strings of power that are directly connected to parties and money. Federal dollars influence massive decisions that are made by state legislators, by school board members, and the list goes on. So, and to kind of give you an idea, this past year there were, I looked it up just to make sure I was right, but this past year there were 591 bills that were passed. It's a record. It's a record number of bills that were passed. And you might think, well, what are these? What are some of these? Now, I haven't been able to review every single one of them, but I can begin to give you an idea that none of you have ever thought of some of these issues ever. And this first article I want to review that comes from the Utah News Dispatch basically talks about how the legislator does not give ample amount of time or warning for people to come forward to debate various topics. And this is a massive problem, because if the bills aren't coming from the citizens, where are they coming from? And this relates back to my root out corruption plan, which it's a 7-prong approach. Okay, the first one is lobbying, and we have to eliminate lobbying. There can't be professional lobbying, because as I go through some of these different things, you'll see, well, wait a second, when did anybody talk about this? When did anybody have an issue with this? And it just goes to show how the government really isn't interested in what the people have to say. They're interested in their own agenda. And they're operating more as king-like figures than they are, what's the word I'm looking for? A legislator, a traditional legislator of what they would be, or a mouthpiece for the people, right? And so you see that, and I've experienced this, that they only give, when the public comes, and they have a short session, it's a 45-day session, and they will often skip public comments based upon a bill, and if they think there's going to be a high level of hostility, they won't engage with the public. Even if they do let people come forward, they limit the amount of time that they get to speak to about 2 minutes. And 2 minutes is nothing. You can barely get anything done in 2 minutes, particularly if you have specific issues associated with the bill. And many of these bills are, 10 or more pages in many cases. And so when you look at that, are these guys actually reading 6,000 plus pages in a bill? Obviously they're not. But I've had a personal experience with this. When I was in a previous city that I lived, they were threatening to remove they weren't threatening, they were going to remove the community garden, which was something my wife and I enjoyed doing. And we were living in a condo at the time, so we didn't have room to have a garden. But we wanted to have a garden, so we put together that garden, and we spent a lot of time there. But because there was a park that was being built next to it, they decided they wanted to level that park. It was a popular park. It had plenty of parking, but they decided that they weren't going to do anything. So I remember going up, and they said I had 2 minutes, and I was trying to get everything out that I had to say. I had a written statement. They wouldn't even let me finish the written statement. I kept trying to talk over them. They kept trying to cut me off. And after all these points had been made, then the government takes 45 minutes to an hour to discuss all the reasons why they need the additional parking. Now, I know parking is small potatoes, but it shows the fact that when they're in motion to do something, they're going to do it regardless of what public opinion is. And there was a huge outroar that took place there. There was a lot of people that came to that particular city council to address this issue, but they didn't do anything. They made all these promises, of course. They would find a new one, that they would do, they'd help us out all they could, and they didn't follow through at all. They had no data to support their decision, even though we provided data. And the data we did provide, though was not mega scientific, at least was something, they had nothing. And they just discounted it altogether. And the same sort of thing happens when you come to these various things that are taking place over the Capitol. They aren't interested in public input. They're interested in moving forward an agenda, making themselves look good, maybe lining their pockets a little. If you aren't aware of the fact that you can actually line your pockets up to 10% of a given deal in the state of Utah. Now, why? Explain to me how that's legal. Explain to me how that's legal. This is a massive problem that exists and will continue to exist until we actually implement the various provisions associated with the plan that I've proposed. And again, it's the lambasting corruption, lambasted. So it's L for lobbying, A for accountability, M for money, B for a bracket system as opposed to the current election system we're currently in. And then you have the TED, which is establishing terms, eliminating the all parties, and then eliminating decadence within those places within government. Because if you were to Google something like Governor Cox at Jazz Game, you'll see him sitting on the floor seats. Right? I don't know how much floor seats cost, but I know that they're well into the thousands of dollars per game, and I doubt that he paid that. I highly doubt he paid that. And there's examples like that and many others that are pretty clear that people are gleaning massive benefit from public dollars when in all reality they shouldn't be. The next one that I wanted to address is it's really irritating that there's a new law that was created to basically create wall-to-wall cities in Salt Lake County, basically eliminating what they call unincorporated islands. Again, this is another power situation associated with the government. The government doesn't like the idea of there being places that don't have their governance. And so instead of allowing these particular unincorporated islands to function autonomously, they want to take over. They want to take over entirely. which is silly. Probably because they want to take on some tax dollars, probably because they want them to do X, Y, and Z. I mean, there's a myriad of reasons as to why they want this to happen, and there might be even sinister ones. But it's hard to know entirely what they're doing. But why would you go through the process of trying to remove unincorporated areas unless you just want to take on additional tax dollars and have more power over these particular areas? This is no good. Okay, we got to stop. We got to stop with the power grabs. We got to stop moving in this way, and we can't do that. So we move on, and I mean, they make the defense is that we're just trying to take care of them. They're just trying to take care of them, trying to make sure that they're in the fold, all that sort of thing. It has nothing to do with it. Come on, these people have never asked for this. These people have never said anything about that. The only reason that you want this to be official or whatever is because you want to exert some level of power, and that's wrong. We have to let people function autonomously, and the more and more the government tries to get involved, the more and more issues they're going to have. More and more issues we're going to have, the people are going to have, not so much the government themselves. And of course, the government's always grown, the budget always grows, they continue to reach their hands into every place in our lives, and it's maddening. Frankly, to me, it's maddening. The next one on the list is that the AP reported that the Utah governor replaces social media law for youth as the state faces lawsuits. They've decided to make adjustments to the original law of allowing a parent to basically grant access to allow their child to access social media. There had to be basically a second level, and it's all based upon the freedom of speech. And the freedom of speech is a very, very important thing, but it doesn't supersede the parents' rights. Okay? How frequently have kids lost their phone? How frequently have kids lost the ability to watch television, have lost other privileges in the household because of the process in which the parents are using to raise their children? Companies, governments do not have the right to prohibit parents from parenting. Okay? The only time that they can intervene is when actual abuse is taking place. And those parameters need to be more defined than they currently are, because the looser they are, the more likely people are going to try and take advantage of those various laws that currently exist on the books. But this goes to show something that's very important, that Utah, even though they have attempted to put a law in place in order to prevent companies from allowing kids to access their content, which, by the way, is often very pornographic, is often extremely inappropriate for kids. Rather than allowing parents the opportunity to be involved in that process, they want to bypass them entirely, which is wrong. That is wrong. And when Utah encounters that, the current government will not move forward to protect it. This is a question of parental rights. This is the question of parents being able to indoctrinate and teach their kids with correct principles that will help them govern their lives in the proper way. But government is unwilling to support the family. Government will cower when they face various lawsuits and probably bad publicity. So this isn't the direction that we need to go in. And again, when I talk about this, when I talk about maybe Governor Cox, when I talk about the government in general, I'm not trying to attack people individually. I'm talking about the actions that they are taking, right? I think of myself as a good person, but I've made many, many mistakes. And if you were to call me out on those mistakes, I would have to agree that, yeah, that probably wasn't the best choice. But this is how I'm reviewing these various articles and things that are currently taking place in the state. The other one that they've done is the House ends up killing the banning of LGBTQ+, pride flags, and political views from the classroom. So why is this a problem? Again, this comes back to parental issues, to parental rights, is that parents should have the ability to indoctrinate their kids. And that's why when I discuss in my plan basically the process of removing the school's power over the kids during that time that they're there and reallocating it back to the parents. And I go through a very specific plan on how that's going to take place. Again, govmat.org, download, the audio, download the text, whatever you want to do, and review this. Because there shouldn't be. First of all, the pride flag was co-opted from the promise that God made to Noah. And that promise actually is all-encompassing in many ways of the sacrifice that Christ gave to the people in order to bring them back, in order to cleanse them, right, as he cleansed the earth. And what has happened is there's been an obvious co-opting of this flag in order to support those things that religious communities find abhorrent, and as I view as abhorrent. Okay, if you decide that you want to be within that community and you are an adult, then that is your prerogative. But you can't go around and preach it to other people because you feel like you need that support, because you need to feel validated. You're an adult and you need to start acting like an adult. Okay? One of the things that I've done is the very fact that I haven't mentioned what my companies are or what they have done is me actively suppressing that information because I don't want to glean any benefit from it. People that are raising flags like this, people that are sharing their political views in classrooms, people that are going through this entire process, this is wrong. This is wrong. You should not be trying to indoctrinate kids to be like you. Okay? It doesn't matter how strongly you feel about it. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how strongly I feel about this. Okay? Kids should be able to make their own decisions when they have all the facts. And their parents should be distilling, again, good principles and doctrines in their children so that they know how to discern between good and evil. This is not the place in any way, shape, or form for the classroom. And another reason why the traditional schooling needs to be basically removed. I don't know if anyone is fully aware of this, but the original Communist Manifesto that was written by Karl Marx indicates that one of the first steps in establishing communism is by taking over schooling, establishing a public school system, so to speak. And we have, and I've talked about this in my book, the fact that we only have 50% proficiency across the board with any given subject. We are failing, massively failing. Only 50% of our kids are responding to the type of teaching that's taking place in public schools. And not to mention the amount of indoctrination that takes place during that time that is completely false, or at very least unfounded information, is inappropriate. So again, this is another thing that Utah, I'm just bothered by the fact that we are not fully aware of what these legislators are doing, and they're doing everything they can to basically suppress this information. So I'm going to hit one more point here, a couple more points here, but that's basically all I'm going to cover for our local news. We have to make an active effort to remove power, and that's why my entire mantra here is morality over monarchy. We have to make an active effort to move monarch-styled laws, monarch-styled policies, whatever they may be, and we have to apply morality to them. And this will liberate the people. This will ensure that we can do what we need to do in the way that it should be done, rather than delegating the power of teaching our kids to bureaucrats and to, in many cases, not all teachers, of course, but those that are flying flags, those that are expressing all their political opinions, people that are just trying to indoctrinate kids to create a bunch of little mini-me's, those people should not be teaching your kids. And to be frank, we have to step up as parents, and we have to take that responsibility and start educating our kids on our own. We have to find ways in which to do that, and the state will support that. The state should function as a support, not the one that's actually setting the agenda. And that's currently the problem with basically everything that the state decides to move forward with, is the state is setting the agenda rather than supporting the people and making the decisions that they want to make. So, and I just want to make a quick point here. Everyone has values and things like that they hold near and dear to their hearts. Okay? They have done things that they believe are worthwhile, and people believe that they should be, and they feel the need that others should feel the same way. I feel that way about this book and this campaign that I'm pursuing. I I need to get it out there, and I want people to listen to it, and I want people to make their own decisions. The issue is if I turn into this, you must do this, you must follow me, you must understand that this is the only way. No, then that's the biggest problem, is that sometimes the words in which we write or speak are going to fall upon deaf ears. And it's going to be more like Moby Dick, the book, written by Herman Melville, right? He wrote it in the mid 1850s, or in 1850 or so. And eventually, by the time he passed in the late, I think it was 1890s, the book was no longer in print. And I can't imagine how he felt about that. I don't know how he felt personally about Moby Dick, that book, or what it meant to him and what it meant to others. But he didn't get to see it in its full vigor by the time he passed. But it was later on in the early 19th century, 20th century, and they were around like 1920ish or something like that. There was William Faulkner. He had read it, and he said that he wished he had written it himself, which pushed it forward into one of the greatest books of sea ever written. And, Herman never got to see this happen. And sometimes that's the way it is, right? I might be moving forward, and I might be writing something and speaking as I am, trying to influence people and to essentially have them look toward God and to understand that they have various rights given by God that cannot be taken from government and aren't provided by government. And many might not listen. Many may not read. Many may not vote. And because of that, I may not feel great about this by the end of the campaign, but I know that if it needs to be done, there might be another William Faulkner that comes along and picks up the same stuff. Maybe my name won't be attributed to it, but hopefully it'll move forward and do good. And that sometimes is all we can hope for. And I encourage you that even if you don't agree with me, that you seek to do good and you seek to uplift rather than gratify yourself. Because when you do that, then you are going to help others. But if you are just looking to make yourself feel better or to put yourself in a better position, then you undoubtedly will hurt others. And again, I encourage you to take the humbler approach. And I just wanted to finish. I'm a religious person, and that shouldn't turn you off. Utah is actually extremely religious. I have a study that I quote in my book that indicates how religious we really are. But this isn't something I'm going to try and hide from. I actively read the Book of Mormon. And there's a scripture I came across recently that kind of directly applied to the liberty in our lives. And this is in 2 Nephi 1, verse 7. And it says, "Wherefore this land is consecrated unto him who he shall bring, and if it so be that they shall serve him," referring to God, "according to the commandments which he hath given, it shall be a land of liberty unto them. They shall never be brought down into captivity. If so, it shall be because of iniquity. For if iniquity shall abound, cursed shall be the land for their sakes. But unto the righteous it shall be blessed forever." So, if we cannot see that our actions are righteous, then they must be contrary. And if they're contrary, we are undoubtedly going to fall. I believe this is one of the reasons that 2024 is probably the most important election. I know people say that all the time, but I really do believe this is the most important election of our time. And because of that, and it's largely because of the fact that we live in an immoral society that praises immorality, that takes no thought to morality, and is more interested in maintaining power and monarchy over the people than trying to reestablish the moral principles that made this country great, that made this state great. And I encourage you to look to morality, to find a way to let it break through. And instead of looking at the odds of someone's potential win, rather look at what they stand for. And I'm not saying that I have to be your candidate. I'm not saying any of those things. But I'm saying that if your candidate that you believe is your guy is not actively standing for morality, is not actively standing to do good in this country and in this state, then you probably have the wrong guy. And it's not based upon their rhetoric. It's based upon their policy and their actions. And I encourage you to review that. Thank you for listening.